Hi, everybody. So I have the pleasure of talking with Lori Foster. Lori, thank you so much for agreeing to this conversation. I really appreciate it. As you guys know, I got a lot of questions from readers. We got over 500 emails from
Oh,
people.
nice.
Yes, we
Nice.
had a lot of questions. So unfortunately, we will not be able to ask all of them,
Ooh.
unfortunately, but we will try to get as many as we possibly can.
Okay.
Since I wasn't sure about confidentiality reason, I am only going to use the first name of the people asking the
Mhm.
questions, just to make sure. If, in the future we do another one and you want me to share your full name, just let me know in the email. So the first question is from Emma, and she's asking, how did you start writing? Was it something you always wanted to do?
I love that name, Emma, by the way. I've used that in a book, I think twice by mistake, because sometimes I've done so many books I forget names I've used. But so I was never even much of a reader. I didn't enjoy books. School gave us stories that I thought were depressing and just more or less turned me off reading. But I would always read. My aunt and my grandmother had way back, years because I'm old, true romance magazines that would have sort of seduction type stories between a boss and a secretary or, neighbors and things like that. It was always very exciting. And I would sneak off and read those, that nobody knew I was reading because they were a little bit explicit. So I always enjoyed those. But then, you grow up and you get married and you have kids and your life is so busy. So I had sort of just not worried about reading. And then I got ill one time, and my sister brought me over a bag, the old paper grocery bags we used to always have,
Right.
full of romance novels. So I was stuck in bed, which is never a good situation for me. I'm a very frenetic person. I'm always busy doing something. And so I just sort of flipped through, you found a cover that interested you. So I know covers are important because that was how I chose my first one. Sort of flipped through the middle, and it happened to open on a love scene. And I got so involved in reading it that I finished the book and then had to go back to the beginning to see how they had gotten to that point. So that was sort of my introduction to romance novels. And as soon as I read them, I was so engaged that I think even after I got well, I went through that entire bag of books because they were so good. There was contemporary and historical romance and romantic suspense. It was just a hodgepodge of books that she had. And I just totally loved them and went through them. And then after reading for a few years, I think most readers probably read a book where they wish it had gone in a different direction, or they wish the hero had done this or the heroine had done that. So, my kids were in school and I was nuts about cleaning the house. So I had the house all clean. And then I sat down and wrote a scene that went the way I wish that book had gone. And the next thing I knew, I was writing entire books. And my stepmother came over one time, and I sort of snuck what I was writing under the seat cushion so that she wouldn't know, but she saw it. And she later found out that there was a local convention in town. She said, I'm going to buy you a ticket to this. I want you to go. And I went, and at that point, I think I'd written like 5 or 10 books. I don't know, a bunch. And I met all these people that were still writing one book. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I do have something marketable. And I did. So that's sort of how it got me started.
Amazing. And how old were you when, the whole starting reading the books and reading the explicit scenes and starting, getting
Well, I already
your
had
career?
3 kids. I already had 3 kids who were in school. So I'm not good at math. So I don't know, but I was probably mid 30s, somewhere in
Okay.
there, I guess. You
So
know,
you didn't start when you were like 12. So it's never too late, guys.
no,
Never too late.
no. Yeah, no, I started reading those true romance magazines when I was very young, but I didn't start reading actual romance novels until my sister brought me those over. So probably what I was reading in the true romance magazines were what most people tend to think romance novels are because they think it's just the seduction, right?
Yeah.
And in romance novels, there's so much more than that involved. Um, I mean, it certainly engaged me. But in these little magazines, that's pretty much what it was, how they're going to get to bed.
Well,
And
yeah,
I
I
and
mean,
I
it
enjoyed
grabs
that part of it.
absolutely like it grabs the attention, but that's not what keeps the attention of the reader. So
Right. It's not what invests you in the characters.
exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. So Emma, I hope this answers your question. Next one is from Mackenzie, who is asking, what is your writing process?
So I'm sort of a loosey-goosey writer. I if she means by the process how I figure what I'm going to write, I sort of just sit down and start writing. So I've always got, I mean, even at this moment, I probably have five different storylines running through my head. And
Okay.
if I give myself a chance to think, I'd probably have 20. But so when I finished a book, or when I start a book, it's just whichever one of those storylines is grabbing my attention the most. So
Okay.
whichever one is kicking my brain the most, saying write me, that's the one I'll sit down and start writing. And I don't really know how it's going to go. I tend to have one scene in mind that has grabbed my attention. And I sit down and I start with that scene and I go from there and see where the story's going to take me. So, if people think I'm making it up as I go along, that's exactly what I'm doing, making it up as I go along, with the idea in mind that these characters will grow closer and they will fall in love and there will be a happy ending because that's vital for me is the happy ending. I don't like to read unhappy things. Life is unhappy enough, not mine, but I'm saying the world around us, there's enough going on that I think of what I do as entertainment. So I just want to entertain.
And you have like a strict schedule when you write, like, okay, I'm gonna write from 9 a.m. to noon every single day, or are you also loosey-goosey when it comes to your writing schedule?
I'm pretty loosey goosey with that too, because when I started, I had three school age kids, right? So I would say, oh, good, the kids are all in school. I'm going to write right now. But then one of them would call sick, or someone would say, well, this one forgot his book, or, there's always something going on. Or there'd be a field trip. I was always the room mom because I like to be very involved and know what was happening with my kids. So you would have to adjust. Plus, I have a really big family, so if something came up and your mother needed you, or your my father needed me, or stepmother wanted something, or my sister, I pretty much always put family first, but with the understanding that I was respectful of what they needed, so they had to be respectful of my writing time. So I remember ages and ages ago being at conventions when authors would say, I tell my kids, unless you're bleeding from three limbs, don't bother me when I'm writing. And I would think, God, I don't want my kids to be bleeding and not tell me. So, but they were great. They would know not to just come in and start talking. They would give me a second to finish whatever I was writing. And they would say, I'm going to go over to so and so's house. Is that okay? And I'd say, yes, make sure you're home by this time. So, it was a respectful thing on both our parts, I think. I tried to respect that I have family and they need me, and they would be respectful that I was trying to write, you know. And even now, my husband will come in, he'll poke his head in the door, and I'll either give him like just a minute because he knows I don't want him looking over my shoulder. I cannot write if he gets too close to my desk. Excuse me. I don't want anyone seeing what I'm doing while I'm doing it. But he'll say, "Do you want some lunch? So what do you want for dinner?" Or because he does all the cooking now, so it's the same thing. He'll be respectful when I'm busy writing. Now, I get up very early, so I'm usually up by 4:30 at the latest, sometimes earlier. I don't know why. It's just one of those dumb things that happened over time, and now my body's just used to it. So I get up and I drink my coffee and I let the cats in or out or whatever it is they want, and start going through social media. Before social media, I would immediately start writing, but now, of course, you have to check your emails, and there's Facebook and Twitter. Well, X, I like X a lot, and Instagram, and I go through all those things first to see what's going on. And so I usually don't get started writing till about 10 or 10:30 after I've taken a walk around our property and all of that sort of thing. And then I just write until the well is dry. So sometimes I'm still writing at 6 o'clock at night, and sometimes at 2, I say I'm done. There's nothing else there. I got to go refresh the brain. So
So
still loosey goosey.
I love that. I love that. It takes the pressure off as well because I feel like some authors
Mhm.
I've spoken to sometimes they're so strict with themselves when it comes to the schedule that they're like, well, I have to write, but I have absolutely nothing to write. And it's like,
Um,
well, then go do something else, clear your head, and then come back, and then you'll write for 2 or 3 hours, and it'll be way more productive that way. So
yeah, I'm a big believer that writer's block doesn't exist, or at least it doesn't exist for me because I don't, what you're saying, I don't try to force myself to sit down and write something that isn't there. But it doesn't usually take me. Sometimes if I just step away from the computer, say I've written myself into a corner where I'm not sure what's going to happen. If I go take a walk or get in the golf cart and take a little ride around the property or just put in a load of laundry, you can do anything so that your brain is taken away from what you're concentrating on. Then all of a sudden it comes to me and I know what it is I need to do. So that's always worked for me. But I don't say I don't know what I'm going to write and skip 3 days. I would never do that either because I have deadlines. When you're a traditional writer, which I am, I think for indie authors it's a little bit different because they can set their own schedules. My schedules are set well in advance. An editor will say, well, we want you to sign for these 3 books, and they're going to be out on this date. And we need at least 9 months from the time you turn the book in. So when can you turn the book in? Now, again, that's math. So I go into my husband and I say, I'm signing for these 3 books. Can you do the math and tell me when that has to be turned in? And so he helps me with the math end of it because I'm terrible at that. So I'm loosey goosey right up until it gets too close. And then I try to make sure I meet my deadlines. And so sometimes I have really long days but I know how to at this point after writing for so many years I tend to know how to pace myself, so I know if it's getting close, if it's not close, if I have time, if I don't have time. So it tends to work out for me. I've been fortunate with that. So
I mean, it definitely has with the amount of books that you have, and they're all so great.
well,
Clearly,
thank
you're
you.
doing something right.
Thank you. That's affirmation I like to get because you never know. I figure at some point, because the world changes and we old people don't always change with it. So at some point, the world might outgrow what it is I enjoy doing. And when that happens, I was talking to Viola Shipman one time. I don't know if you know
Yeah,
Wade Rouse, Viola Shipman, and we were talking about getting your career to a certain point. And I said, I felt like I'd pushed that boulder up those hills, going the extra mile, traveling, which I don't really enjoy doing, and trying to get as many books done each year as I could. And I said, I feel like I've pushed that boulder to the top of that hill. And if it starts sliding back down at this point, I'm just going to get out of the way because I've had a lot of fun. And careers don't last forever. I mean, some authors they do, but I'm sort of okay with that. I have a very happy life going on. So being a writer doesn't define me. I enjoy it a lot. I'd like to keep doing it. I love the contact with readers. But if it starts sliding, I'm not somebody that's going to fall apart over it. Does that make sense?
it absolutely does. But at the same time, don't you think romance will never get old in the sense that, I read some of your earlier books, and I mean, it's still the same thing, attraction, suspense, love.
I don't think love will ever get old, but I think love changes sometimes. Our perception of what a relationship is has changed some. And I'm sort of, and I am one of those people that I want everyone to be happy in whatever way makes them happy. I want everyone to be independent, be happy, run your own life. So sometimes what I do, what I enjoy writing and the way that I perceive that might not be how someone else does. And I'm okay with that. I hope they're okay with it too. So you can't stay the most popular dog all the time, and I'm okay with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Perfect. Next question is from Florence, who is asking, how do you approach writing chemistry between characters? Are there specific moments or traits that you focus on to create authentic connections?
How do I missed the first part of that. How do I
How do you
create the
approach
chemistry?
writing chemistry? Like, how do you create that chemistry? I think is what she's asking between the characters in your books.
Gosh, I have no idea. I think characters come to me as like human beings. And we look around life and we see that chemistry all the time, right? I mean, I remember being at a mall one time and it was these young high school people. And the girl stepped out of a dressing room with her prom dress on that she was trying. And the poor young man that was there with her, he looked like his eyeballs were going to fall out of his head. You could tell he was just so madly in love, I mean, it was high school, young love. And you see that and it just sort of you feel that emotion, that the young love and then the comfortable love and then the we're settled and happy kind of love. And you see that between people. And I think, like I said, I have a really big family, many that are in love, some that have been in love and out of love, and been through their own trials and tribulations. And so I just think you absorb what chemistry works and what doesn't. And you could write, if someone gave four different authors the same two characters and described them and
Yeah.
said, put them together, they would write them so entirely differently based on their own perceptions of how they would mesh. So we never know, right? When you meet someone, my husband and I are really, really similar in some ways and very, very different in others. Um, so you see that you don't know which parts are going to click and which parts won't. So I think I let the characters work that out for me.
Love that. So the next question is from Clara, who is asking, romance novels often offer an escape for readers. How do you balance escapism with realism in your stories?
Well, so again, the world is a really dangerous, scary, dark place, especially right now with so much human trafficking going on. And, everybody seems to be angry at everybody else. And social media has really amplified that, where everyone feels very free to tell you what they're angry about. And it drives me nuts. I really wish people would stop and think about sharing what's made them happy or what they like instead of what they don't like. But that's just, again, me being an old dog. So I feel like when we put that into books, we see all this misery going on around us, but we also see a lot of love and a lot of happiness and a lot of people creating joy in places that you wouldn't see people creating joys. So I think you can take the realism that exists in the world and you can find that perfect person that helps, that put two people together and it's the perfect couple and they help each other cope with whatever's going on or whatever someone has suffered, whatever's in the past for them. I wrote a series with mercenaries that helped, I've written a couple now, that helped rescue women from human traffickers. And a lot of that I look up in real life news to see who's gone through what, how they were captured, how they were rescued. And then I just take the few facts that I get and I write them into a story that with, with not the real characters, with my own characters, much bigger scenarios, of course. And the men are always gorgeous and, very romantic, which not every guy that goes out to rescue a woman is, but um,
Yeah.
so you try to mesh that with the good that happens in life. you know i I have people that write me often. Recently just heard from someone who was telling me about the really awful experiences she had had, stuff that could make you cry, and she reads books as an escape. And she said, you literally covered some of the situations that I had been in, but you worked it out for them. And that's what you want to do. You want to take the situations that people have maybe been in, sometimes everyday casual circumstances, and sometimes really extreme, rape and abuse and kidnapping and all that, and still have them be able to come around and find that happier place and someone who helps them to cope. At least it works for me, since I can't actually solve all the world's problems. At least I can find a way to solve them for the characters.
I think it's a great way of looking at it because, like you said, it's a very dark world at the moment. So to
Mm,
find a little bit of joy, to be like, okay, well, it might just be a book, but they're getting through it in the book,
yeah.
so I can too. So I like that.
I
Um,
do too. It means a lot to me when I hear from those readers. It's, just so wonderful to know that something I wrote, I mean, I'm a nobody, but something that I wrote, something that they read in my book helped make their life that tiny bit easier for that minute while they were reading it, you know.
it must be so touching to hear them tell you that and explain, tell you their own story and how it affected them. It must be quite something to hear or read when people
Mm-hmm.
tell you that. Next question is from Lawrence, who is asking, in your opinion, what makes a love story timeless?
Well, just that the fact that two people will mesh because you never know what two people will mesh. You and I might meet someone and say, God, she's annoying. She's such an annoying person. And we might meet a guy and say, God, he's overbearing. But those two people meet and they're perfect for each other. And he doesn't think she's annoying and she doesn't think he's overbearing. And they're able to build this wonderful life together. I think that's what romance is. And I think that's what makes love timeless. Somehow in nature, as God created it, everybody has their perfect someone out there. Do you find them right away? Sometimes I did. I found mine in high school, but sometimes it's harder than that. I have a sister who was divorced and remarried, and she said he's not the first one, but he's the right one. Now that she's together, and that's how life goes. When you find that perfect someone, doesn't matter if it was 1099 AD or if it's now. When you find that right person and you're in love, that's the love story, and you just never know what two people will mesh and why.
That. Next question is from Betty, who is asking, how much do you think the romance genre influences social views on love and relationship? Do you feel a responsibility as a writer in shaping those perceptions? That's a big question.
My only responsibility is to entertain. So I don't try to influence anyone and I don't try to educate anyone. I want to entertain people. And if I can accomplish that, I feel like I've done my job as a writer. I don't think that romance novels affect society, but I think society affects romance novels. So I was talking to another author because many of the publishers are getting away from the married to live happily ever after because we live in a different time and not everybody needs to be married to be living happily ever after. And she said, but I noted, I don't want to say her name because I didn't get permission from her to share this, but she said she's a big Swiftie. She loves Taylor Swift. And she said, when Taylor Swift started dating whoever it is she's dating, some football guy, um, she said the message boards under it, she goes, were just blowing up with all these women that were thrilled with the idea that Taylor Swift might be forever in love and getting married. And I thought, so see, that's not such an old dated idea if it's blowing up like that, if people still love the idea of romance and one person and forever. So publishing is going to do what publishing does to keep up with the times. I'm going to stay true to who I am and what I like to write and what I like to read. Another author should do the same, and society is going to do what society does. So that's what I say. Careers come and go with the times, and I'm okay with that. I just always want to be true to myself. And I want to be nice to everyone and hope that everybody finds their perfect person in whatever way works for them.
Perfect. I am sorry if I'm going to butcher that name. I'm going to say Anya is asking, have you ever written a romantic scene that surprised you in how it unfolded? How do you allow for spontaneity in your writing process?
Every scene surprises me. If it's not surprising me, I'm bored. I try not to plan too far in advance because that's what drives me to write is to all of a sudden I'm going, oh my gosh, look what they're doing here. Far too often I write myself into a corner where it's making me cry. Someone is revealing something that happened to them I'm an old boo-hooer these days, and my husband will come in and go, what's wrong? I mean, it's just the stupid scene I'm writing. It's so sad. He'll say, why do you always do that to yourself? I said, I don't know. So that she can be really happy later, I guess. or so he can be really happy later. So every scene surprises me. There have been so many times. I don't know if anybody's read my body armor series, but Lise was a character who started out in the MMA series I wrote. I can't remember the Ultimate series. I've written so many I forget who they are. And he was going to be a bad guy. And if anyone hasn't read this, stop listening because this is a spoiler. He starts out as a bad guy, and as I'm writing it, all of a sudden he's not a bad guy. He's just this misunderstood guy. And he's kind of trying to redeem himself and become a good guy. And then next thing I know, he's got the first book in the body armor series because he redeemed himself that much. I think that's life. I don't think there are naturally bad people in the world. I think their circumstances and the situations they're in, many, many, many times their upbringing and the surroundings mold them. And if they don't have someone who can show them a better way, if they don't have positive influence, then they're the bad person. If, like Lise, all of a sudden they're around better people and they see a better way and they want that same sense of honor that this person has, I think people can change and do the right thing. That's me in my Pollyanna world, trying to be happy go lucky here. But I hope for that, so I write that often. So I'm often surprised. I have never had a character go bad on me, but I've had some that were supposed to be bad suddenly be good.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, Lisa's a great character, and again, spoiler, please stop listening if you guys haven't read the book, and please go read the books because they're great. When Leaf shows up at the bar and steps up and admits to what he did and tries to make it
mhm.
better, that's just being human, making a
Yep.
mistake, owning up to it, and just doing what you can to make it right. And when I read that for the first time, I was like, oh, right, okay, they're human. They're not all, perfect gods with
Hmm.
six packs and stuff. And I thought it was brilliant the way he works for it throughout the series. And then
Hmm.
when you get to see him at Body Armor, you're like, oh, great. I'm so
Yeah.
happy for him. So I thought Lise was a very human character and one of my favorite personally.
Thank you. Because, in real life, that would be so hard to do, to step up around these people that you like and you respect and say, I screwed up. I did this. And I know you're probably all going to hate me, but I have to tell you this awful thing I did. So I meant to, I mean, it was a complicated scene, but what he ended up doing was not great. So but he redeemed himself, and so I tend to do that a lot also. And another theme I like to do in books, and sometimes I don't realize I'm doing it until it's been done, is I like people to have a different perspective on things. So, and Men Who Walk the Edge of Honor with Teresa's sister Lonnie, she feels like she acted irresponsibly by going to the beach and hanging out. She got kidnapped. And then Dare tells her, but if you hadn't got kidnapped, because he went to rescue her, and then he also found Molly. He said, if you hadn't done that, I couldn't have found Molly and I was able to save her. So, sometimes if you just change your perspective, maybe this bad thing happened so that this good thing could happen also, you know. Not that I think we're chess pieces that are moved around, by fate, but you just never know. I think you can always put a spin on something and find that bright light if you look for it, if you try to find it. So that often happens in my books when I don't mean for it to, and then all of a sudden, oh, okay, well, that's why that happened that way. You know, we do have a light at the end of the tunnel here.
Absolutely, especially with a subject that's so dark and
Hmm.
so depressing, like human
Yeah,
trafficking. It's good to find some light at the end of that tunnel.
right.
Lucy is asking, what's the most rewarding part of writing romance for you?
Uh, well, one thing, being able to find that happy ending, because I can't do it in real life always. I've helped with a few happy endings, but not nearly what I would like to. So I think that's a big thing to be able to put that into words and show that sometimes it'll work out. Sometimes sometimes that dark tunnel does lead to the light. But also, like I said, hearing from the readers who there was one gentleman who was going through chemo, and he said, and I haven't heard from him in years, so I'm sure he passed away. But he said he had had cancer multiple times, and he was going through chemo again, and he said he was bored. It took so long, and then his wife gave him one of her romance books to read, which happened to be one of my books by me. And so he said, "So I've been reading you, young lady." He was an older gentleman, because I'm not young. But this was a few years ago too. And he said, "I've been reading you, young lady, and I like your books, and thank you." So I sent him a few more, and he wrote me for years. Beautiful handwriting, all longhand and detailed letters, which I think was all part of him getting through the cancer also. And then when he stopped writing, I thought, oh dear, but I heard from him for years. So, that kind of thing means a lot to me, to most people, I'm sure.
Yeah, you probably made his last few years,
Gave him
you
a little entertainment, you know.
exactly. You added to his happy pile, which is great. Um, Maria is asking, have any real life love stories, whether from friends, family, or public figures, inspired moments in your books?
Um, no, sometimes more headlines. Generally, if anything's going on with family that would inspire me, it gives me worry. That's usually what I think about with families, things that are going on that aren't quite going right for them. And so I'm worrying about them and hoping they'll be able to get things worked out. And I would never put any of that in a book. That said, there have been situations where someone will tell me something that happened and my brain goes off because it does that. It'll go off, and all of a sudden I've worked out a whole different scenario that stemmed from the little bit of a thing they told me. So in that way, I guess that could be, you know, um, but not an actual real life event that they've gone through or anything, you know.
And last question from readers. Belinda is asking, what was the hardest scene to write in The Love Shack?
Um, there were several that tugged at my heart in that because she had been through so much, Berkeley. I felt so bad for her. I can't imagine being a young person being duped by a married man and then having his wife be a local celebrity that would abuse you because of it. So she had been through quite a bit. But I think the scene that comes to mind is when she and Betty are talking. I believe they're sitting on the couch. And for anyone that hasn't read the book, Betty is a much older character, like the matriarch of the town. And uh, Betty wants to adopt an old dog because she's old. And I think that was, I'm about ready to sneeze. I apologize. Stuff my nose here. I think that might have been, what was the question? Difficult or,
Uh, the hardest scene to write.
yeah, okay, the hardest. Because I wanted Betty was going through this transition from being, which she did in each of those three books, from being a mean old brittle, you're the epitome of an ornery old gal, to turning into more of a mother understanding figure, to being more sympathetic and loving the girls that were in, she thinks of them as girls, grown women, but she thinks of them as girls, and those three books. So that scene I felt like was pivotal because she's acknowledging her own age and wanting a dog because she's softened enough that she wants that companion, but she doesn't want a puppy that she's going to leave behind. You know, she wants some old thing like her. so so that it's not some puppy running her ragged. I think there's a part where Berkeley tells her, well, this dog, because she's old, has some bladder issues. And Betty says, I know just how she feels. So I, it was a difficult scene to write because I wanted to convey all that for Betty, but I also didn't want the story to be Betty's story because it was Berkeley's story. So I remember I juggled that one quite a bit, looked at it, checked it over. I don't rewrite very often, but when it's a scene like that where I want to make sure I get it right, I work on it a little bit more. So, oh,
So in terms of
I'm gonna duck out of view. 1 second. I didn't want to sneeze on you. Okay.
And so what's
How
next?
embarrassing. Oh gosh,
We're
so many
human.
things. I had to bring my list of what's next for me because I have so much going on.
Yes,
So
that's what
I
we like to hear.
I do. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next before this all happened because I've kicked around the idea of going indie just to set my own schedules, but I also like the idea of not having more work. And indie authors work their tails off. I'm so impressed with how hard they work. TJ Logan is a friend of mine, excellent author. And TJ Logan, not there's an athlete also named TJ Logan, but TJ Logan, the author, um, she every time I talk to her, I'm thinking, holy cow, you work a lot. And I don't have that kind of energy anymore. So I ended up signing for uh, 6 books again just recently, which surprised me because I didn't really mean to. I meant to sign for like two, but I signed for two of those are small books. So I do a benefit book every year. So a benefit book for me is a book where it's a special contract. So the advance and all royalties for the life of the book, so as long as the books are available, go to a local no-kill animal shelter. And I've been doing that for many years now. And Harlequin I started them with Berkeley and Kensington, and then Harlequin did them for years with me. They were really great about it, but this time it'll be with back with Kensington. So the next two they're related to 2 books that I already did, and those will be with Kensington. So the first one is the two of us, and instead of it being a standalone book, Kensington is putting it with a story with Maisie Yates. So, and I love Maisie. She's such a fun writer and a fun person. And so it'll be out with her. That's the two of us. That is, I have to look at my note. That is March 25th of next year. And then I signed for 2 mass markets with Harlequin. And the first one of those will be Let Me Be the One, which is one of the few titles I've ever come up with on my own, by the way. I don't title my books. Generally, my editors title my books because I'm terrible at it. And my working title is always just the name of the guy in the book. So, like when I was writing the two of us, the working title was just Ford because the story is about Ford. But when I started this book about Tanner, my editor said, "Do you have any title ideas this time?" I said, I suck at titles. I said, maybe Let Me Be the One because that sort of works out. And she said, "You're better at it than you think. Let's go with that." And I'm like, been in this business for how long? And I titled a book, which I never do. So that'll be the first of a 2 book series, and that's April Fool's Day. So April 1st, which I think is hilarious.
Please
And
don't
then
change the date on us. Please, please keep it on.
I know, isn't that hilarious? I'm like, April Fool's, there's a book out. I know it just cracked me up when I saw that. I don't choose the dates, the publisher does, but I thought, okay, well, I can remember that one usually. And then I'm in an anthology with Fern Michaels. I think Fern Michaels she's like the superstar of our industry, right? She's amazing. And Carolyn Brown, who I've met several times now. And she's just, if you've never met Carolyn Brown or read her books, she is a hoot. Very, very popular author and also hilarious. So it's called Lilac Time, and that's going to be out April 29th. And then my first big book with Kensington, The Guest Cottage, will be out the end of May. May 27th. And that's called The Guest Cottage, and it is a book after my heart. Holy cow. I It was a story I wanted to write so badly, and I wasn't sure if anyone would let me do it, and Kensington did. So I'm really excited. Very, very romantic, has a hunky marine in it, but it has a really burned woman, romantically relationship burned. And she has reasons to just want to move away, start over, forget everything. And she's doing okay on that until the marine comes into her life. And then he sort of helps her start over, in a night. She doesn't need any help. She's a very accomplished woman, but he helps her heart to start over. So I love that book. I'm really hoping readers will like it as much as I do.
I mean, sounds amazing. You had me at Marine, so I'm very excited about it. Can you just repeat the date for our listeners?
Okay, the two of us is March 25th. Let Me Be the One is April Fool's Day. Lilac Time is April 29th, and The Guest Cottage is May 27th.
Perfect. So guys, please put them all in your TBR. It's important because they're going to be great, all of them. So please, please put them already in your TBR for next year. Lori Foster, thank you so very much. I really appreciate
Thank you.
this. And readers, fans, followers, stay tuned for some bonus content for the people who donated to the Kickstarter campaign.